Cole leaned against the coolness of the unflinching door and let himself slide down. He tried to think of what could be useful in here if he didn't find his contact, maybe some portable chargers or something. His new radio was secured where it couldn't easily get knocked free of his body and had batteries for a few days, but it'd be nice to reinforce that. Cole also knew that he only had a few days to get back past all the border checks before they'd likely not be secured anymore. His radio had the volume almost all the way down and was operating on low power, so he didn't have to worry about it blasting his location if errant transmissions were received. While Cole waited for the cartel to leave, he went through his mental checklist as best as he could. There were 2 or 3 caches he'd already checked, multiple empty dead drops. It had seemed that nearly all of his supply stashes had been bare, stripped out by either in need or greedy, trying to get out of here. Hopefully none of them were stupid enough to try to fight and were able to get out. He wasn't holding out hope, though, because it had been long enough and so few from this area had been heard from. The cartels had nearly complete control over the bottom third of the state. This building, however, seemingly untouched after an initial wave of looters swept through a month back. Cole mused that perhaps their appetites for TV had been satiated when they realized there was no power and very little running water. That probably killed their appetite for computers and miscellaneous electronics. But this building felt different. Something must have gotten to the building, or someone decided it was easy enough to lock down. Activate intrusion countermeasures with some kind of backup generator, come up the locks, and then make it look dead. Was someone hiding in here, perhaps? Or was everything left in here as a contingency plan? Or maybe the cartels themselves did this like a backup warehouse. Except there were no guards. Maybe there didn't need to be guards. There was shuffling up to the door outside, and Cole quietly lifted his butt off the ground and away from the door with his hands to the dusty ground. Some people speaking in angry Spanish pounded on the door in various spots, trying to see if maybe he was leaning up against it. He wasn't now. Out of all the words they said, he picked out some broken words that seemed like they were a search party. Out trying to find the distracting, foul celebration party. Out to find him during the party. Also to be on the lookout for the other group that keeps evading them. Cole heard some numbers thrown out also. It sounded like the group had dwindled, unfortunately. There was more pounding on the door, but it held fast. The banging finally ceased. The cartels weren't getting in without some serious equipment that they likely didn't carry with their assault or recon groups. Cole heard more Spanish. They sounded annoyed, then decided to check elsewhere. He sat for several more minutes and heard quiet chatter. Cole waiting for a few more minutes, but heard the chatter get closer. Considering the risk, Cole carefully stood back up, and in the transition, several children appeared in front of him in the shadows with bats. A book slid across the floor and hit him in the foot. Cole trusted them to not club him to death in the meantime and picked up the book. The book read, "The U.S. Constitution, Common Core Edition," which made Cole sneer in a mock convulsion. A realization came over Cole's face, and he pointed at the book and paused a second for effect. "I'm not with them. I believe in the real Constitution of the United States of America. What's left of it, anyway." The shadows began to reveal the true age of the Batmen as Cole's eyes adjusted to the darkness. Their eyes already attuned to the dark, but their experience over the last months unable to hide their youth. Cole let slip before stopping himself. "You're just..." Spears got leveled at him. One said abruptly and seemingly without purpose, "Cobalt." Cole, stunned by the revelation, stammered for a second as his memory tries to switch gears as fast as possible. He tried not to imagine barely getting to parry the first spear as he was skewered by the second and pinned as they finished him off. Cole heard some shuffling still outside, unfortunately, as he saw the crude computer parts sharpened and improvised into pointy angles. Cole only took a few seconds to respond, but it seemed like forever. Vanguard. A relief seemed to instantly blanket the room, and they all hushed, as the shuffling quieted once again outside. The straggling cartel scouts exited, hopefully without any of the intel they needed to confirm that Cole was still with survivors, or was there with survivors. More tense minutes passed. Finally, when everyone seemed to collaboratively agree The danger had temporarily passed. The two youths helped Cole to his feet. He was sorer than he realized, with his knees reporting their age with pain. There were several other aches he'd realized as the adrenaline wore off, where the attackers earlier had seemed to score some minor hits on him. The young adults seemed to realize this as well and ushered him several rooms into the building. Every window had been blacked out to keep the light from escaping. Further and further in, Cole was escorted until there were no outward-facing windows in sight, and an internal light augmented what little moonlight was coming in from the distant ceiling windows. Cole did his best to not bump into anything as he walked to make noise. He saw more youths out of the corner of his eyes in the shadows and was led through the large building. By the time he got to their improvised first aid station, it occurred to him there were no adults here at all, and the first aid gal didn't appear to be midway through her teens. The equipment she had around wasn't much more than all the rounded-up first aid kits from the required stock the store was ordered to have. There also seemed to be a few boo-boo kits that techies could potentially get working on computers, including lots of hand sanitizer, but nothing that could triage serious wounds. The young medic could see various cuts and scrapes and wanted Cole's clothes to come off so she could get him properly cleaned up. She tried to shoo the two guards out, which they left reluctantly. As one departed, he reminded her that Spence wanted to see him right away. The medic said as soon as he was medically evaluated, he could be free into the building. They mentioned that they would be right outside the door if anything were to happen, then exited. Cole realized in his mind that Spence was probably in charge, and the name sounded vaguely familiar. Maybe Cole had vetted a Spence into his group a year or two ago, but couldn't remember. Cole also realized that what he had walked through was probably an improvised quarantine area in order to not expose the healthy population to new people. He was impressed. As Cole mused to himself, a small earthquake rumbled, which wasn't out of the ordinary, and the medic didn't seem to be too alarmed. The doors shut as the two guards exited, apparently not worried about Cole. He figured his challenge phrase worked to gain their trust, or maybe they recognized him, or both, or maybe they were only desperate. Either way, Cole was doing his best to take care of them if they were the ones that reached out to him. His thoughts were interrupted when the medic asked him to take off his shirt and pants with more authority than he expected. Cole responded with as much hearty humor as his deep and authoritative voice usually put out with the accompanying smirk. "Under what authority there, little miss?" The medic responded. "Well, I'll have you know, I was the top of my class in sports medicine, and I've already pretty much seen it all with 2 seasons of basketball, football, and baseball. Oh, and by the way, you don't want to get an infection. Nobody has seen or heard of the antibiotics since a week after this all started." Cole began to explain that he was fine and could tend to himself, but upon some self-inspection realized there were a few moderately deep wounds he wasn't going to be able to reach. The young sports medicine student interrupted the excuses and protests that Cole was trying to formulate and threw him a pair of novelty computer-branded oversized boxer shorts. "You can wear these, Mr. Macho," the medic said professionally, although in the dim light he could see a little blushing going on. The branding on the shorts proclaimed that it's what's inside that counts. It was a blue logo with a swirl around it. It was time for Cole to smirk again. "Cole is fine, miss." She turned around, prompting him to change. She began to get some lights ready and some bandages, ointment, and paper towels. "Well, the name I've sort of picked up around here is Reagan, though it doesn't seem to have anything to do with a doctor reference." Cole shuffled off his ripped, torn, and bloody shirt and pants and shimmied into the branded boxer shorts that seemed to fit him fairly well. "Nice fit. You do this a lot?" Cole asked. Reagan turned around with her meager first aid provisions and shined a bright enough light on an office chair and instructed Cole to sit down and began her inspection. The lighting seemed like some kind of LED flashlights that had a sheet of paper in front of them to soften the light, attached with some duct tape and zip ties to a boom mic stand. Reagan went through some history matter-of-factly while she examined Cole. "We haven't rescued anyone in a while, But after the initial collapse, when we were taking in everyone like-minded, people were all beat up really bad. Cole sat down as she started disinfecting his wounds one by one, ordered by priority, and then patching them up.